I'm not enough. I'll never be enough. If people knew me, they wouldn't love me. These are like the major just hammers that people are hitting themselves with or getting hit with by other people.
And so we invite you in. Enjoy the Be Positive podcast and enjoy hope, optimism, and encouragement. Back to Be Positive. And like I was telling you about the show, it's everything about optimism, hope, encouragement. A little dose of that is probably needed in today's world.
Yeah, why not?
And so I'm excited to spend some time with you.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about this and just wanted to hear your story and get a little peek behind the curtain on experiences that you've had and challenges that you've had and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, why not?
And I was talking about this earlier, and it's a common topic. There's hardship in today's world.
There sure is.
And it's massive in some places, but it's in everyone's day-to-day. And I noticed this. I just got back from a trip. I traveled the last few weeks across 9 different countries, and there's an underlying tension, Alex, across the board. People are just wound a little bit tighter.
Yeah, I read something the other day. It was an interesting quote. It was not attributed to anybody in particular, but the modern world was described as challenging for the soul but easy for the body, as opposed to generations past, which were a little bit easier on the soul and tougher on the body, thinking hard labor.
Yeah.
You know, now we have so many things provided for us. Our basic necessities are all but guaranteed, but I mean, a lot of our soul tension exists between the ears and in the heart.
Yeah.
And it's we're all going through this crazy world together, and nobody has a great roadmap except for the roadmap that's that we've had all along.
Yeah.
And that's really been what's working for me and for the people around me is getting into the Word and staying linked up with wonderful people who are Jesus. I don't want to call them Jesus freaks, but they love Jesus. I love Jesus, and it's that gives me hope and optimism, because I can find evidence out in the world for all things terrible, but you know.
Well, and it's really the focus, because what I hope to do is to shift focus and move it off of every negativity, every wrong thing, every challenge, every hardship, every atrocity, and not to pretend that those don't exist, but to be able to see good things along the way.
100%.
And it's just like anything. When you begin to look for them, they begin to pop.
Yes.
And I saw this in these travels. I went to, like I said, 9 different countries, and all different levels of some of the most impoverished scenes to some of the most opulent scenes around the world. And you know what I found in every situation? Didn't matter the economic status, found a smartphone in everybody's hand.
Is that right?
Across the board. And I was stunned, because you would think that there'd be some qualifier for being able to get a smartphone, but everyone has a smartphone. And really exaggerated examples where families living, okay, they're under a shelter, but there's no walls.
Wow.
Mom, dad, 3 kids, all holding smartphones. Go figure.
Yeah.
So I'm watching
in.
human behavior change, and I tease people about, walking through life like this.
Yeah.
Just looking down and not seeing things around them. And it's in part what's a driver for me to encourage people to look for what's good.
Yeah, a lot of people have their heads down right now. I'd say thank you for sharing that example, because it paints a picture for everybody that it's not just a Southern California thing or a United States thing, that everybody's kind of going through this odd negotiation of technology versus reality. I remember a number of years ago, I went to a Clippers game with my brother, and next to us was a couple with an infant, and I mean an infant, like 1.5 years old, and the baby was swiping on an iPad playing some dopey game to gather coins. And I was like, this is just sensory overload. You're getting this kid addicted to stuff. So it's pervasive, not just in our country, but it is surprising to hear that it's pervasive in other places as well. It's mildly concerning, but so all the better reason to look for evidence of the positive and the good, right?
Yeah. So what do you tell people? And I'm really curious about this. We're going to be spending time with a couple of young bucks coming up here. And
good friends of mine.
And they're, looking at life forward. Everything is in front of them, but they're right smack dab in the middle of controlled chaos.
Yes.
And so do you tell them to put down the phone? Do you join them on the phone? Do you encourage time away? I mean, this episode isn't about smartphones, but it just prompted me to ask the question: how do you encourage them?
I'm comfortable talking about that. I mean, I have a strange relationship with technology. I'm constantly using my phone. I'm always on the internet. I'm using AI for creative purposes, and that's very exciting and engaging, but also it's drawing me away from reality and people and spending time in the Word. So it's not as though there's trade-offs. No matter what we're doing, there are trade-offs. But I think one thing that's great, and I won't spoil it too much for the other guys who are going to be on this show, but we've got a young people's group that has just been lighting people up. It's a 20s and 30s group, and every church in the country right now is looking for that secret sauce because fewer people are getting married at a young age and just jumping right into it. And so churches are having to figure out, okay, how do we attract single guys, single gals, and not necessarily play matchmaker, but just have community and just have a place where people feel loved, seen, heard, like they belong. That's the mission critical stuff that I think is the missing piece of the pie for most people right now. Those are the soul needs that are being met in that group. You know, we're every week in, week out, we're getting into the Word. We're coming up with a study. We're crafting a study with a single word. So we'll do joy, grace, grief. 1 week we did stormy seas. That was an interesting study. But most of overcoming, you can't just distance yourself and become a Luddite or maybe become proto-Amish all of a sudden. That's not realistic for most of us. But what is realistic is leaning into relationships very purposefully and deliberately. I think that's the only way to do it.
Do you see a transition with them? You got 20, 30 somethings coming into a room. Everybody's got something in their palm. Do you do phone stacks? Do you encourage them to put it down? Do you just let it naturally progress into human to human?
Nobody's touching their phone during that group.
How do you do it?
Oh, I mean, we pass out journals. We pass out journals and pens, and we do it the old-fashioned way. We do it analog. If there's any writing that needs to be done, it's just pencil it in, pen it in.
So you do a study on stormy seas. Somebody's not turning to TikTok and saying, "Oh, tell me about stormy seas."
No. And the fact of the matter is people are so starved for authentic connections that if you present an inviting space and really just accompany that with inviting people who are asking good questions and who genuinely want to hear the answers, my goodness, are people just overwhelmed with, wait, where has this been? I haven't been part of a group like this, maybe ever. Maybe I haven't done this since I was playing sports when I was in school or whatever, what have you. So it's just creating a different dynamic, and people are craving it. It's not as though it's something that we're having to beat people over the head to say, hey, pay attention, put down your phone and look in the other person's eyes and come up with that really strong connection. No, this is how I describe it.
It's even better. It's coming from them.
100%. I just say, as group leaders, these other guys who are going to be on your show in a bit, I say it's not our role to make all of this happen. You know, we're here to set the table and let God serve. He's going to serve up the messages. He is going to bring those relationships to light. Oh, it's beautiful, man. I'm just blessed to be a part of it. I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Are they making comments? I'm interested in their feedback, like saying, "Oh, I feel seen and heard when I spend time with this group," things like that.
Well, that's like, great question. That's emotional language that we're all getting comfortable with. To give words of affirmation like that, to say to you right now, I feel very seen, I feel very heard. That's not vocabulary I was equipped with when I was in my early and mid 20s, even late 20s. So
last year.
Yeah, right. We're all getting comfortable with this as we go, but when you take those relational leaps of saying, like, you make me feel noticed in a way that I haven't felt noticed in an exceptionally long time. When somebody is so bold as to say something like that, and you can meet them where they're at and say, like, whoa, this is real. This is not phone grade nonsense. This is not posturing. I'll tear up in that group. People will tear up in that group. We haven't had any like exceptionally ugly cries yet, where it's just sobbing, weeping.
Yeah.
But I'm open to it if it happens.
I'll bring it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you ever want to come and just just let the floodgates open, you're more than welcome.
It's early on. You started that this year, right?
Yes.
But any discovery that's emerged out of that, where like in the surprise category, like I didn't think this would happen, or I didn't think we would see this. Anything come to mind?
Well, this originally started as a Christmas group that we just decided to do as a one-off. I guess one of the biggest surprises was that the group doubled in size from that session to the next one. And so we kind of came to the realization very quickly that like, oh, this is something that people really, really want and need. We meet every other Sunday, and then we have separate men's and women's groups on the off week. The women, of course, are far more organized than we are, and they're forging connections. They are so biblically dialed in, and they're just quoting scripture constantly, and I feel humbled by my lack of knowledge on a comparative basis. Yeah. But it's also so edifying to be like, no, this isn't a comparison game. This is our community we're walking together with. And if somebody misses a week, if somebody's not on the page that they need to be, nobody's browbeating people. Say, get back here, do the right thing. Haven't you read this scripture? Yeah. It's not like that at all. It's really a genuine community, and a lot of that comes from the fact that the two guys who are going to be on your show, they love Jesus, and they have this magnetism to them. I'm just kind of like, I consider myself the assistant coach of that group, whereas my mentor and colleague on the Surface Tension podcast, Craig, I would call him the grand architect, and then these guys are the star players.
The offensive coordinator, he's calling plays from up above, can see the whole field of competition.
Yes, entirely.
Nice.
Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question in terms of the surprise or the wow factor, but the whole thing's just been one gigantic surprise after another, in that I've never done anything remotely close to this, because in my walk, most of my buy-in on a group level has all been men's groups, so I've never really done any kind of mixed gender group, and especially with just a younger crowd, and I'm like, whoa, this is different. So the whole thing is surprising in a circumspect fashion, not necessarily just in an incidental one where I could just point and say, like, that piece surprised me. The whole thing is constantly kind of giving me pause and saying, whoa, this is really special. I'm lucky to be a part of this. When God calls your number and you just say, okay. Okay. And that's been my experience. I know that's been the experience of most of the people involved with this, is that it's just, okay, let's do it.
So let me ask a question. Let's go a little bit deeper. You see people that become transparent.
Yeah.
And they feel comfort. There's these authenticators. They feel like these conversations are raw and real. And they bring up, hey, I'm struggling over here. And then is there a flashback like, oh, shoot, that's me 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever time frame, but the same struggle, and now you're on the other side of it. They're just maybe hitting it head on. Have you had any experiences like that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like in some areas I'm farther down certain paths than this group is, just by virtue of my age. But in terms of the spiritual warfare that everybody's experiencing, the nonsense of the modern world, the moral inversions of our culture, we're all tackling those things lockstep with one another. So I wouldn't say that I have exceptionally unique advice to bring to people, but occasionally it's, hey, I know what it's like to be younger, a little bit aimless, just kind of wanting to check out a little bit. When I was in my early 20s, I was bummed out on a perpetual basis, and
bummed out. Is that you were depressed?
Oh yeah, just like terminally. I would describe myself as just in a very gray space where I didn't really care where I was going, didn't have any kind of direction, and that was not me for my entire life up until that point. I just kind of hit a wall at like 22, 23. And then...
What did it look like? I'm bummed out.
Oh, what did it look like?
Yeah.
It looked
what
like...
What did it look like for you? What'd you look like in that space?
Oh, gosh, well, I weigh about 210 pounds now. I weighed $150. I was eating just Fruity Pebbles and drinking tangerine juice.
Nice.
I was chiefing the devil's lettuce, an old jazz cabbage, just day in and day out. And so...
Empty bags of Cheetos everywhere?
Yeah, no, I was a bit slovenly and I just skinny and defeated and not really engaged at all.
Any purpose, any mission, or you're just bumping through life?
No, just kind of cruising. And because I had been good at most things, like I was fortunate enough to be naturally gifted at quite a few things growing up, whether it's, sports, academics, doesn't matter.
What sports?
Basketball was my deal. My brother played basketball as well, so we were just a basketball family. But I was naturally gifted at a lot of things and didn't have to work that hard. I kind of breezed through college. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and when I was done, I just kind of had the expectation that the rest of life would kind of present itself to me and just say like, oh, here you go. You just keep winning. You just keep winning and doing great things all the time, and people will always love you. And
how'd that happen?
What do you mean, how did that happen?
How did that unfold?
I just...
Didn't happen?
Well, I moved to, I haven't really told this story, but after college, I moved to Paris, France.
You did?
Yeah. Went after a girl. She was, something else, Rob. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, she was gorgeous and very just emotionally in tune. Yeah. I went to Paris, and we had planned on going together. She ended up not going. And I went anyway. Yeah. And that was the first time in my life that I really experienced immense sadness and loneliness. Yeah. And I was just kind of faced with like, oh, it's just me. Yeah. Because I had always been surrounded by other people. And I don't think I encountered the Lord until I was like 28, 29. Right. So I was just in this kind of purgatory of shuffling through life for most of my 20s. And I don't know if it was necessarily like a hard existence, but it was bleak.
Yeah.
It was.
I had such a similar experience. I'm sitting here listening,
nice.
and it's resonating in terms of I was graduated, turned pro in tennis, and then was out on tour. And my grand plan, I played Wimbledon, was going over to a tournament in Switzerland up in the Alps called Gstaad.
Yeah, sounds great.
Flew my girlfriend over to propose to her. The grandest of plans. And the night before I was going to propose, walking up onto the slopes of the Alps above Gstaad, she broke up with me.
My goodness.
And then left. And similar to you, okay, here I am in Switzerland. And I don't know if I was bummed or angry or out of control or despondent. I was probably the collage of all of them.
Yeah.
But tennis isn't a community sport. You're on one side of the court. At that time, there wasn't these fleets of coaches, especially at the levels that I was playing on the professional tour. And so you were alone. And a lot of alone time when you just had your heart stomped on.
Yeah, that's rough, man.
It didn't go well.
What was the lag time between that experience and then your encounter with the Lord? Or did you grow up? Did you grow up as a church-going guy?
No, it was funny. I just told this story. Out on tour, there was a player, former number one in the world back in the 60s and 70s, a fellow by the name of Stan Smith.
Sounds like a great guy.
And Stan would sponsor pastors to travel on tour with the players. And so I was at a tour that was going through the Hawaiian Islands, and there was a player out of San Antonio, Texas, John Benson.
Okay.
And John invited me to a Bible study. So I have a degree in English coming out of UC Irvine.
Great.
Here's how naive I was. I go, Bible, that's just another book. I'll go to a book club. No big deal.
Yeah.
And so I went to this Bible study and then started this venture from there. Didn't accept Christ until after I was done playing tennis, but really cool story about John Benson. And this is a great statement of faith. That was in 1984 that we were on tour together. And then we went to Bible study together. And then we finished that tour. He went his direction. I went a different direction and playing different tournaments. 2006, I'm on the grounds of the U.S. Open back in New York.
Nice.
Walking down the plaza, and here comes John Benson the other direction. And we see each other, hug on each other, and as I'm hugging on him, I said, John, you won't believe it, but I've accepted Christ.
Yeah.
It's 2006.
Okay.
He whispers back in my ear, Rob, you won't believe it. I've been praying for you since 1984.
Get out of town, man.
22 years that he had no identity if we'd ever see each other again, but he was just diligently praying for me.
Man.
And in that journey, obviously, I had accepted Christ.
Man, that gives me goosebumps
I know,
a little
it's
bit.
so good. It's such a good story.
That's wild.
Good statement of faith. But I know that heartbreak, and I see that, I guess I was kind of a leading question. You know, as you're with this group and you're, presenting whatever word, you're getting them to dive deep and spend time together, and you see different things. And
yeah.
I see heartbreak a lot. And sometimes, maybe a relational heartbreak, but I just see a lot of broken hearts, whether it's relationship driven or not.
Yeah, I mean, there's the way that I would say our current, romantic culture is set up. There's just a lot of attachment ruptures that happen because people will get into these, short, intense relationships. In the Bible, it doesn't talk about dating, and there's certainly nothing that exists in the Bible as dating does now. And I can tell you, like, in my 20s, I dated quite a bit, and, every breakup left like it took like a little bit of chiseling out of the heart, and all of a sudden I found myself in a place, probably in my, late 20s, early 30s, where I was like, I got to put this heart of mine into a safe and then cover the whole thing in concrete and then send it to the bottom of the ocean, because I can't
defense.
Yeah, well, I can't take any more attachment ruptures, and I think a lot of people feel that, whether they would articulate it as such.
When my girlfriend broke up with me, she didn't label it an attachment rupture.
Yeah,
That's a great term.
I'm lucky enough to spend time with a couple friends who are psychologists, and they pepper me with fun language and terms.
I love that.
So that rubs off by osmosis.
So but do you see it in the 20s and 30s? You see them with these same struggles, just either having been heartbroken and then now on defense, now being hyper protective, or just stumbling around going like, I've been crushed. I don't know what to do.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ways that people's emotional story presents itself, whether they're checked out and kind of presenting as nihilistic, or whether they're kind of histrionic and just hysterical all over the place and very loud and needy, or whether somebody's completely checked out. Our stories affect us in different ways, and we walk around with, I don't want to say that, actually, let me bounce this off of you. Are we the sum total of the stories that have happened with us, in us, through us, and to us?
I would say yes, in the context. Each one of those experiences, each one of those stories has left a thumbprint, and not in the context of carrying around hardship, in that rucksack of garbage, and dragging it, through every episode in life, but being able to look back at that quick enough to go, okay, I remember, and then have those pivot points. This is what I did, and I made a left turn or made a right turn. I took something that was destructive and made it productive.
I think so much of, just in terms of my story, I've never rescued myself from a terrible story. When I'm in a dead end with my story and I'm in that gray area, it's always been other people. It's been God that's met me in the gray area and said, like, hey, I have guys that our mutual friends who have stuck with me through times when I've just been, I haven't been entertaining. I haven't been super pleasant, but I think that's kind of a secret sauce that a lot of people are craving, is like, hey, help me figure out my story.
Yeah.
There's a reason people are going to therapy, but therapy for the most part is, it ends up being gaslighting people and telling them lies. The best thing we can do for people who want story corrections, if you want to correct a story disorder, you tell people the truth. And whether that's done in a relationship, whether that's you hearing it, from the Holy Spirit, hearing it, from the Bible, there's no better antidote to a terrible story than just the smallest amount of truth. The smallest amount of truth will darken the darkest, or will brighten the darkest room. Yeah. And so I'm just fascinated by, you know what, going back to the group that I'm so lucky to be a part of, that's the astonishing thing, is people leaning into one another and figuring out, okay, I don't have a disorder, because the world wants to give people labels, disorders, right, identity crises wrapped in weird language.
Just confusion, yeah.
But if we can disarm that and say, most of us have story disorders, and we can be comfortable with that, and say, hey, God, what do you think about this? Yeah. What do you think about my story? Yeah. I know I'm not fair to myself when I'm looking at my story. Are you fair to yourself whenever you're thinking about yourself? The metacognition, you're thinking about?
I think I'm probably more commonly my toughest critic.
Yeah.
Things can go well, and then I'm acknowledging the good parts, but then I reflect back, and maybe this is just from my athletic days. Oh, I could have done better here. I could have performed at a higher level there. I could have. So there's those influences, but I don't know. I categorize that into things that contribute to becoming better. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing that just to flog myself. I'm doing that I have this desire to become better. If I'm a C+, somehow, some way I can scratch to a B-. If I'm a B-, never thought I could get there, but perform at a B level or B+, or A- or A. So I'm looking to improve.
Well, that's impressive. I don't think that, I would say the vast majority of people probably don't have that kind of improvement mindset when they're flogging themselves mentally and verbally and story-wise. It's just a ton of conclusions of, I'm not enough, I'll never be enough, if people knew me, they wouldn't love me. These are like the major just hammers that people are hitting themselves with or getting hit with by other people.
So Alex, let's just role play for a second. So I want to hear.
Let's go for it.
As we close out here, really what you say, you're in the hunt. You've been placed in front of that person.
Yeah.
And they've turned to you. Now there's this trust, there's this authenticity, there's relationship.
Yeah.
And Alex, I'm struggling. I just feel like I'm dirt. I'm less than dirt. Blah. What do you do?
What does Jesus say about your story right now?
What's he say?
That's something that you're going to be able to figure out as you develop, for the audience, as you develop your relationship with Jesus. You'll find that the tone and texture of Jesus' voice is quite a bit different from the tone and texture of your voice. Yeah. When you're telling your story and you're saying, oh, I blew this, I'm not good enough, I messed up here, this isn't going right, these relationships are broken. Jesus is quite a bit more gentle, quite a bit more encouraging, and he's there just to, more often than not, the best thing I could do if you were having a terrible time is just be with you.
Yeah, just spend time.
I'm not going to be able to sort out most people's problems. I can't even sort out my own problems. Yeah. The best thing we can do for other people most of the time, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong or you see it differently, but just being there is more than enough.
Yeah.
And so in a world of screens and just showing up, I don't know. I know that sounds like kind of cliche.
No, but I think it makes sense. That resonates for sure.
Yeah, we need to belong to a larger, more meaningful group, and what better group to be a part of than a group that has oriented themselves around peace, truth, and love. My goodness. Yeah.
Before we break,
yes,
your 2 podcasts. Alex Graeber, tell me about the 2 podcasts.
Oh, my goodness. Well, one of them is easy to talk about because it's a Christian podcast. It's called Surface Tension. I do it with a fella named Craig Morris. He's got a PhD in theology. Guy's a genius. Yeah. I'm just lucky to be a part of that podcast with him. We know him. All of our friends know him as the question master in chief. Yeah. He has made it his life's mission to ask better questions to get people to the heart of the Father. Yeah. And I'm just lucky enough to be, part of that ride. Nice. The other podcast, that's a little bit of a different kind of mission for me, where I'm trying to reach people who are not in the church. There's something called the faith scale, and a lot of people look at a faith scale and think it goes 0 to 10. It actually goes positive 10 to negative 10. And the way that our world is configured, more people than we're comfortable with are probably in that negative space, that negative faith, where they're actively hostile towards God, faith, Jesus, church, prayer, you name it. They hear those words and they recoil and they say, no, I'm too sophisticated for that. Or no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, none of that Jesus stuff.
And so those people need love just as much as any of us.
Yeah.
And so with my other podcast, I use more secular language. I'm telling jokes, I'm telling stories, don't always use the Lord's language. But it's tough to spin both of those plates because one seems very righteous and authentic, and the other one is I'm more of playing a character. And
the name of that podcast?
That one's called Darbycast, Darbycast. And I mean, it's mainly, it's right-leaning conservative humor, and I have people who listen to both. And they're like, I need both of these things. I need to laugh. I need storytelling. And then I need deep questions and try to get, my soul in alignment with the will of the Father and what his plans are for me. So I'm lucky that I get to do all of that. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm stretched thin in doing such different things. It would be more straightforward if I just picked one or the other.
One channel.
But I really love what I get to do, and it's incredible to be able to come on your show and just spend time with you. And all the time we've spent has been unrecorded, and I love all that time. But this has been super cool.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing with the 20s and 30-somethings, and in your way, whether it's the Surface Tension way or the Darbycast way, really just being raw and real.
Yeah.
In extending those same messages that I'm extending, optimism, hope, and encouragement, which is the cornerstones of this program. And so, Alex Graeber, I'm glad that you joined us. Thanks for spending time.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the BePositive Podcast. You can find us at YouTube, Spotify, Apple, on social media, BePositive Cause, or at our website, bepositive.life. This is the home of optimism, hope, and encouragement. We invite you to join us and become an ambassador of optimism.